Hello and welcome to What's New in Reaper 6.54. In this video, there's a bunch of features to go through, changes to free item positioning, changes to how effects are handled, including oversampling, and much more. And this is a fairly large update. There's several changes that affect many important areas of Reaper. And I'm pretty sure that in the next few days, if not in a week, we will see another smaller update with refinements to these features, bug fixes, that sort of thing. We're going to start off with a change to ARA support, which is used by Melodyne and a few other programs. They've updated to API version 2.1 with ARM support. And I'll just show you this very briefly within the preferences, how you turn this on. So I'm running on an ARM Mac, and if I open up the preferences, VST, you just want to enable this, enable ARA for VST3 plugins that support it, and then restart Reaper. And that works in the universal build of Reaper on an M1 Mac. Melodyne has recently updated. Maybe hold off on updating until the next update, but I think there's some bug fixes coming for that. Up next, actions to move media items to and from hidden child track. This is two new actions in the action list: move all media items to new hidden child track, and move all media items from all hidden child tracks. Let's bring in some media. I'm just bringing in some random files here. I'll just put these on the same track, and let's mute this first one. And so I'm going to run this action, move all media items to new hidden child track. Run. It's going to keep the original track there. It's going to turn it into a folder, and that unmuted item you can still see is active here. So this works with muted and unmuted items. If we want to bring that back, so everything's back on the main track, move all media items from all hidden child tracks. I'll run that, and that brings those back in place where they were. Let's do that again. Put those in there, add in another track, and I will run that and hide that. And let's just take another one here, like this guitar pluck, and maybe I'll edit that so that some of it is muted, and I'll hide that. So what's actually going on in the background? It'll look like this. So all these hidden files are within child tracks within a folder. So all these items were hidden from the timeline, but still active, and kind of just an automated process of hiding items from the timeline and automatically moving them to new tracks, which is kind of the main benefit here. I'm going to undo that so it's back to how it originally looked, and then we're going to use this action, move all media items from hidden child tracks. If I run that, that puts them all back in place within the same track. We can use an action like offset overlapping media items vertically, and then this is more laid out like they were before. An interesting way of working, probably won't be moving things back and forth all that often, but it is helpful to like save something for later, keep it in place, not have to make a new track, drag it down, mute it, and hide it. It does do all media on the track, and it doesn't put them all each on separate tracks, which may be what you want to do. It could be useful to have all those items go to separate tracks. But regardless, that's the new feature, and I can see that being pretty useful. Up next, we have some changes to free item positioning. Glued items inherit free item positioning Y position, and when recording in free item positioning mode, only adjust existing item Y positions if necessary. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Free item positioning is not something that most Reaper users use, but it is one of those unique features that Reaper has. So you can enable free item positioning by right-clicking on a track, and that allows you to place items vertically and horizontally within a track, however you like. So I'm going to turn off the grid lines, and I'm just going to drag in some samples here, and you can see I can put these anywhere within a track, and versus on other tracks where it kind of snaps within the grid lines, or within the track lines, I can have these like pretty much anywhere. So I can drag it in there, make things overlap. And in this case, it's split automatically because I have this action, trim content behind media items enabled. So if I did that with another item, insert that as a new item, and there, that didn't split. Let's turn off the auto crossfade. And so these items can overlap, they can stack, they can be resized vertically, all that sort of stuff. This feature itself is not new. This has been in here for probably 10 years, if not longer. And this is just one of those unique features that kind of helps you in certain situations. I've used it on a dialogue edit for a documentary where in the original recording, there was a car driving by, and I think we needed a timing edit right in the middle of that. And then so that car drive by, it was hard to remove it entirely without affecting the dialogue. But also it jumped because of a small timing adjustment. And then I actually had to add in a car noise again to make that seamless and to do it all within one track effects chain rather than having to do this on several tracks, put them in folders, all this sort of thing. So I just did it for that one, 3-second moment. I just went into free item positioning mode, stacked the dialogue, the background noise, and fill within there, and that worked. I also do this for video edits, mostly with text. So if I have multiple pieces of text that I want to pop in at different times, and they are different lengths, but I also want them to be kind of contained within a single track instead of having, 20 tracks for a particular piece of an edit that's only used for 3 seconds, but it's kind of complicated. You can kind of compress it all into a single free item positioning track. I've done that probably half a dozen times. One of the changes from the changelog is the Y position when gluing. So if let's take this item and command click and click on the second item. If I glue these, so that's kept the same position vertically that was already there. And then when recording in here, it's going to not interrupt the positions like it did before. So it's just gonna kind of put that in there. And let's do another one right here. So I'm recording anywhere. All these items would be mixing, and this item has gone in there, put it at the bottom, and not really messed with the other ones other than kind of shrunk them a little bit. So yeah, that's free item positioning and some of the changes in this update. There are more changes to media items. Replace show overlapping items in lanes option with offset overlapping items vertically. Add preference for item vertical overlap percentage and opacity. Add preference for minimum height to display peaks. Let's take this out of free item positioning mode. Let's put these items in here. Under project settings, advanced, item mix behavior. My template still has the old way, enclosed items replace enclosing items, but this is now set to items always mix. And so these items here, they're always going to play even if they're stacked on top of each other. And then one of the other changes was offset overlapping media items vertically. This was show overlapping media in lanes. Same sort of function, but they took out the word lanes in there because that has other meanings. So overlapping media vertically, and that's just going to it looks kind of funny when you move things around horizontally. But yeah, just the earliest item goes up to the top, and then, chronological order is the height position. And this is different than free item positioning. See, I can't drag it up. I can only drag it left and right. And then there's some preferences to modify that. So if we go to preferences, appearance, and media item position is a whole new page for this. Collapse free item positioning when track height is less than whatever pixels. And when project setting, enabled to offset overlapping media items vertically, offset 100% of the height, and draw as opaque. Starting with the offset amount. So right now it's at 100%, but let's offset this by 45% and apply that. And now they're more overlapped, but they're still in order, and it's not free item positioning. So it's a more compact view, and these are drawn as opaque. If I uncheck draw as opaque and apply that, you can see the outlines of each. Again, this may be something that most users don't use. When you do use it, there's a lot more control over how it looks and how it functions. And I'm going to color some of these. And yeah, so you can still see the items clearly with their separate colors, but you can see the full outline and the waveforms behind each other. Let's switch back to free item positioning mode, and the preference to collapse free item positioning when track height is less than 0 pixels, we're going to change that to 150 pixels. So fairly large, or that threshold between free item positioning, which again looks like this, where they're overlapping and freely adjustable height-wise. If I adjust this down to below 150 pixels, it's going to pop into kind of a standard track view where the items are overlapping. Without trial and error, how do we determine what's a good height for that? So let's say we want the track to be shrunk down to this height. I'm going to use the screenshot tool, and I'll just measure this. So that's saying 46 pixels. I'll go back to the preferences and set this to 46 pixels, and okay. And so now it's going to be in free item positioning until I hit that exactly 46 pixel amount, which is pretty much all the way shrunk. But yeah, that works for me. There are even more changes to media items and editing. Change default item mix behavior to items always mix. Existing projects and user default project settings are unaffected. I did show that already. Don't display cursor feedback when mouse is over controls of locked items. Locked items do not auto crossfade with unlocked items, and prevent editing take envelopes when item is locked. Let's put this back to normal. I'm going to turn off free item positioning. Options, turn off offset overlapping media items vertically. We're going to lock this item, and if I turn on auto crossfades in the main toolbar, or options, auto crossfade media items when editing, and I drag an item over it, normally, previous to this update, these items would still crossfade. You would start to get a fade on this item that I'm moving. And if I unlock this item and I drag that over, now you can see that it's overlapping and crossfading. So that's a new function. Now let's take this item here, and I'm going to put on the item volume envelope, and I'll just draw some envelope points like that. Now I will lock this item, and now I'm not able to accidentally adjust this envelope or move the item gain or anything like that. I can't move it left and right. Yeah, and even though these items are not crossfading, I can still see through them, and this envelope is not getting in the way. So that's a recent change. Item envelopes won't be affected by the mouse. So locked items are more locked than they were before, and they don't interact with other items as much, so they don't crossfade those items, and you can't accidentally adjust envelopes on there. For razor edits, add click context mouse modifier to move areas up or down without contents. Razor edits on free item positioning lanes snap to item top and bottoms, but do not necessarily span the entire track height. Add razor edits affects all track envelopes separate from move envelope points with media items. Let's look at that last point first. So we're going to right click on the envelope options button in the main toolbar, and we go to razor edits in media item lane affects all track envelopes. Let's put in a volume and a pan envelope, and I'll just draw some junk in here. So when this is off and you make a razor edit, it's just going to be over the area that you select. You can still select the item and then drag down to also include the envelopes. And with this option on, I can just make a razor edit here, and that automatically selects the envelopes below. So we can move this, or we can razor edit it and move that like that. Click context mouse modifiers for razor edits. So mouse modifiers and razor edit area, left click, move areas up without contents, and move areas down without contents. Let's do a control for move area up and shift control for move area down without contents. Okay, so I've got a few tracks here, and let's hide those envelopes. So I've got a razor edit here in the middle, and I'm going to control click, and that's going to move that up. And if I control shift click within the razor edit area, that will move that down. So again, that is mouse modifiers, razor edit area, left click. And I've set up control and shift control for move areas up without contents, move areas down without contents. Without contents just means the outline, that razor edit selection, because if you moved this, that would split the items. And, it's not always what you want to do. There are some times when you want to keep your selection and then move that around. So I did a command click to move it forward, did a shift command to move it backwards, control to move it up, shift control to move it down. Yeah, that could be helpful. And coming back to free out and positioning mode on this track, we're going to look at razor edits, how this affects that. So I've got some items here, and if I wanted to do a razor edit, we're just going to see that razor edit area just within the media items that are affected. And so if I do both of these, we're going to see that this affects both of those lanes. Free out and positioning mode with razor edits works a little bit easier for you. But again, this isn't a function that every user uses. A lot of users do not use free out and positioning mode. But for those that do, I think this will be a nice improvement for you. And now we're going to talk about some changes to effects and effect processing. First, some little stuff. Change add effects window pane configuration, horizontal versus vertical layout via context menu. Don't change configuration on double-clicking the divider. When opening effects chain for a track that has no effects, by default, show the add effects window rather than the empty effects chain window. Option in preferences plugin. REAQ, expose global gain as automatable parameter. And we will come back to even more effects changes. But we're going to start off with the divider. So it used to be that you could double click here and change between a horizontal and vertical layout. I think some people were accidentally doing that a little too often maybe. So now it's going to be in the context menu, meaning going up to the options menu when it's floating, and vertical pane configuration. It looks like this. So there's the categories and favorites list at the top, and then the result of each of these folders, contents of each of these folders at the bottom. We can also access this menu by right-clicking in any of the empty spaces in kind of the frame of the interface. Not here, not down here, but right-click maybe where it says filter, and we can have this vertical pane configuration checked or unchecked. And that's the same if this window was docked. One of those other changes was when the track has no effects and you click on the effects button. It used to be that the add effects window would pop up, plus the effects chain window would come up in the background, and now it doesn't. So load an effect, and now the effects chain is there, the effect is loaded, but that step didn't show the effects chain until I got to the, until I added that effect. Now, if we want to go back to the previous behavior, that's going to be in the preferences for plugins. And that's this function here, hide chain until added. So let's do this again. So this is going back to the old way, right-clicking here. You can see the add to effects window plus the empty effects chain. Now, there are times you just need to get to this window to do things like pasting effects. I didn't have one copied. But if you wanted to copy from a track that has an effect into a track that has no effect, you wouldn't be able to get to this window as easily with the new default setting. So if you want that back to the old way, hide effects chain until added is now a new preference. Within REAQ, you've probably noticed this gain slider on the side. This is often one of my go-to volume adjustment for a plugin chain, because it's just right there, and I'm already using REAQ in most effects chains anyways. But there's times when you need to automate an EQ change, but you also need to adjust the global gain. And unfortunately, this was never a adjustable parameter until now. So if we touch this, go to param menu, we can now see global gain is the last touched parameter. You also find it in the FX parameter list. We can show that as global gain. Even more effects changes, per effects instance and per effects chain oversampling options, and reinsert do not allow processing if FX oversampling is used. So let's bring up the effects chain. Let's bring in some sort of effect. Let's do a decapitator. So oversampling is essentially taking the sample rate, doubling it, and processing a particular plugin or chain at that higher sample rate so that harmonics are processed in a way that they don't bounce back or alias within the audible spectrum. You're not going to hear this on bass-heavy sources. You're going to hear this on things that have a lot of high-frequency content, stuff that goes above the Nyquist frequency, which is half the sample rate, and then aliases back into this harsh tone. So I'll demonstrate this. This may sound a little harsh, but it is one easy way to show this. So this is a JS plugin modification of the built-in tone generator, but it follows the play state. So if I put this on play and I do a 1 second play duration, for 1 second, that's going to play. We can hear aliasing whenever the sine wave frequency goes above the Nyquist frequency. My sample rate is 48K, so anything that's generating harmonics of frequencies above, let's say, 22,000 hertz, that's going to reflect back into the audible spectrum as lower notes, which is pretty weird. Maybe 16,000 is not audible to everyone, but there's a sound there. If I put on decapitator and saturate this, there's definitely a tone there. And let's raise the frequency. So I'm generating tones at 20,000 hertz, distorting it, and ending up with frequencies more like, what is that? 2,000 hertz? Something like that. I'm going to bring up the master track. I'm going to use the frequency spectrum analyzer. So here it is on the spectrum analyzer. Tons of aliasing. Turn off decapitator. And it's just that one spike, at that selected frequency. That's how it should look. And going through a distortion, obviously it's going to distort, it's going to change the tone, but it shouldn't be a lower pitch. It should just be harmonics. And now we're going to oversample this plugin. So instead of my project running at 48 kilohertz, this plugin is going to run at 96 kilohertz, which puts all those reflective frequencies way up above the audible hearing range and thus changes the tone. So I've got a tone at 20 kilohertz pretty much. With decapitator, it sounds like this. Very audible, lots of harmonics reflecting back. We can change this oversampling function in several ways. I'll show you from a single plugin. Click the plus button, the preset management button, and then down here we've got chain oversampling or effects instance oversampling. So I'll just do it for the chain, and I'll set this to oversample up to 96 kilohertz. And you do need to press play again before this recalculates. So there's a little bit of a sound there, but it's pretty much inaudible now. Although that harshness has been removed because it's happening above the audible spectrum, filtered out before outputting the audio. We can go up one setting further, changing the chain oversampling up to 192 kilohertz. And to my ear, that's fairly similar. It's mostly done the exact same thing as the 96 kilohertz version. And this may be a case-by-case basis. Some plugins will sound better the higher you go. Some may even sound worse. Some plugins already have oversampling in them, so you wouldn't want to oversample those plugins further. The downside of the oversampling is the large amount of latency. So definitely don't oversample if you don't need to. And if only one of the plugins in the chain is oversampled, it's going to look like this, where keep an eye on the CPU and latency. Switching to Decapitator at 2x. And so this, oh, come on. So that's at 2x. So yeah, oversampling is going to add a lot of latency, but potentially it's going to reduce all of that harshness of the high frequency harmonics reflecting back into the audible spectrum. You don't need this all the time. Only use it if it sounds better. And yeah, don't worry about it on bass heavy instruments, anything that's been already filtered quite heavily. That's kind of an exciting feature because that can actually improve the sound of your mixes. Pretty cool. I will also say, watch out for going above that 192 setting, because this plugin in particular, or all the Sound Toys plugins, they crash instantly at 384K. Just be careful. Save your project frequently. And then the last thing regarding this is the reinsert plugin. Because these signals actually go through the audio interface, you can't do the oversampling there. This is not possible with oversampling in the chain or per instance. Reinsert will just be silent if you are trying to use that within a oversampled effects chain or trying to do it just for that one plugin instance. For importing, add option in Preferences Media to target the top part of a track to insert new tracks to receive the media. I'm going to zoom out fully and bring up my Media Explorer. I'm just going to drag a sample and drag it in there. And you know that's been how it's always been. You can drag and drop into the empty TCP area or into an empty area of the arrange view and add in tracks. But it's always been to the bottom of the list. And so this new Reaper update adds in a function to use the top part of a track. There's a little tooltip that says insert track right there, and that's going to put in a track within the middle of the arrange view. You can also do that on the side, on the track control panel area. As long as the tooltip says insert track, that will do it. Pretty cool. To enable this option, we're going to Preferences Media and turn on Allow Drag Imports to Insert Tracks. With that off, it's going to be how it was in previous versions of Reaper. We're not going to get that tooltip dragging sounds in. That's just going to add it to a track. It's going to jump between tracks. We can only add it to the bottom of the TCP or arrange view. There's no way to import onto a track. But I really like this new option, Allow Drag Import to Insert Tracks. I find that very helpful. For rendering, display graph of loudness values of rendered file in HTML statistics view. Right, so I've got a time selection here. I'm going to render this as a new file. Master mix time selection. Let's normalize it to -24, sure. And 24-bit wave, that's all good. Let's render that. If we click on Stats and open Render Statistics in web browser, check this out. We've got the statistics like we saw before, but now there's this loudness graph showing the LUFS momentary and short-term over time throughout the render process. That's pretty cool. This is a great way to analyze loudness in a non-real-time way using loudness meters and graphing this. This is pretty neat. And you can hover your mouse over and see the exact time, value, and LUFS change at that point. That is pretty excellent. For themes, add theme overlay color and blend mode for muted, unsoloed, inactive, or locked media items and tracks. This is pretty cool. So you know that if you mute items, it grays out the track. And if you solo tracks, it grays out the other tracks. Yeah, anything that's not heard is going to be muted like that. And also muted items, they dim. There's now theme adjustments for that. Used to be just, 80% gray or something like that. Now it's adjustable on a per theme basis, and you can even turn it off entirely if you want. So we're going to go to the action list and search for theme tweak and open up show theme tweak configuration window. And if we search for muted, that's this option here. So It's this pretty dark gray color here, but let's change it to this pink. Why not? And so if I mute this track, it has this pink purpley overlay. Or if we solo something, all the others are pink, purple. And then further to that, we've got the blend mode. The default is normal 50%, but we can change this to something like 0.40, and so that that may be better. Let's switch back to like a dark gray. And so actually that's pretty much blended in with the background colors. Maybe that's not what you want. Maybe it is. Let's go with a pure black and mute. Yeah, let's change this to a blend mode alpha of 1, completely black. You can't see those items there at all. We could set this to white, and then it looks like that. And if we do white with a blend mode of, let's say, 0.3, looks like that. Lots of combinations there if you want to change things. And if you want to disable this function entirely, just set this to alpha of 0. And then there's no difference between muted and unmuted items and tracks other than, the icons on the items or the, the lights on the TCP and mixer. That's it for this video. It's a pretty big update, lots of nice changes. Expect bug fixes coming in the coming days and weeks. And yeah, lots of great stuff in here. If you missed any of the previous update videos, there is a big playlist that I'll link down below going all the way back to Reaper 5.0. Covered pretty much every update and every feature. You'll learn a ton going through that. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter, support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.